Welcome to Burn It Down. This is an AI and education podcast. I'm the founding director of Develop AI. We do AI training. We work in media and education around the world. We help companies and newsrooms implement AI strategies. And my fascination is not just in media, but also education. And I wanted to do this podcast to really talk to the experts and people in my life around how they were educated, what they think went right, what they think went wrong, where the technology got involved, and also the future. Like, where is education going because of AI? What are people going to need to learn because of AI? What's going to change for the better or for worse? So today we're going to be talking to one of my oldest friends, Gavin Haynes. I'll let him introduce himself, but he is a journalist, a professional, and a man that you want on your side, a man that you want to speak to about a whole host of subjects, but particularly history, media, education, and economics. So I'm excited, and here's my conversation with Gavin Haynes. So Gavin Haynes, we have known each other for 25 years, is that right? 26?
That's about right. Yes. Future kids and all the rest.
Future kids. Okay, so that's a good place to start, actually. Maybe we can get into that in a little bit. The sort of dirty secret of my family is future kids. How about start by introducing yourself and, where you fit in on this podcast?
I'm Gavin Haynes. I am a journalist, a podcast producer, and fellow at the Danube Institute in Budapest. And I fit in because I guess we went to school together, and we have had many moonlit conversation about higher order subjects like how to educate yourself or your children.
How would you describe the education system in South Africa? You're in Budapest now, but you spent a lot of time in the UK. Your parents are from the UK. I was born in the UK. So where is the contrast between these two systems? What do you think worked for being taught during the 90s in South Africa as well? What are your thoughts on it?
Okay, I would say the South African education system was sort of unmolested by history or dogma, particularly. It felt like an education system where people had just kind of roped together some facts and sort of chucked them at children. I think the contrast with the UK is that the profession has been put in the hands of educationalists, people with PhDs in education science, and it has certain bents and tendencies, and the 90s was a bit of a golden mean in that sense. I think even South Africa fell under the thrall of things like outcomes-based education within a decade of us leaving school. But at the time, it was, I guess, conservative Christian nationalism's last stand. It was the cane. And the sort of mini tennis set bat that was the beating instrument of choice at junior school. It was just a strong emphasis on, quite a small, well-formed curriculum of facts. One teacher, chalk and talk, a few projects every term. And I don't want to look back in too much of a halcyon days, but
for people who don't know you, they won't know that you're listing these things in a revered way. Like, you're saying these like they're good.
Right, yes, okay, God. But I think it worked. One is always sort of at the nose of one's particularity, and, that's how I grew up. And it was a lot of fun, it was like the turbulent term of Tyke Tyler. It was the sort of a balance of things that were actually educative, things that were kind of chaotic and taught you about the world, and things that sort of formed values within you, however much that is possible.
Yeah, I think the value side, and that's not something you can quantify or pass or fail, but that was a strong emphasis. And we were kind of talking about, just before we push record, about this idea of that there wasn't a strong emphasis on, and for better or worse, there wasn't a strong emphasis on, we are teaching things that will make you job fit. at all, right? And I think that has changed. But what about the technology side? Okay, I know it seems strange to talk about technology in terms of the 90s. You mentioned Future Kids, which maybe will be a shadow over this whole podcast in terms of my parents ran a small sort of school where they taught people computers in the 90s, which was very interesting and kind of probably formed a lot of my personality around this topic. But I wanted to ask you about master maths. What does master maths mean to you? Can you describe it for someone who maybe is under 40 and not in South Africa?
Okay, straight in there with the master maths, huh? Okay, so master maths was something that happened to me in standard 9, so I would have been about 16 years old. And I had switched schools. Paul and I had both switched schools at exactly the same moment, unbeknownst to each other, and didn't really come into contact with each other for another 18 months or so. But I had somehow skipped a semester of geometry and mathematics, and my math was just kind of going nowhere. So my mother, in her great wisdom, reading a few report cards, sent me to this after-school sort of proprietary system called Master Maths, where you sort of walk down to Claremont and you'd go up to this sort of top room, kind of office space, and you'd be sat down with a tape recorder and an exercise book, a sort of a pre-filled exercise book. And this had carefully graded exercises in it. You would listen to the tape-based instruction. You would... A literal for the kids, literal electromagnetic tape, which had sort of tiny particles which had been shifted to resemble sound waves, and so and you would do the exercise, and after you'd done the exercise, you would get a sort of a key on the sort of opposite on the back page of the book, and you would get maybe a little bit more explanation on the headphones. And there was a sort of a rocker-style motorcycle jock who would sort of flit around, and if you were having real problems, you could sort of raise your hand in this sort of little sort of mini classroom, and he would come over and tell you why you'd done it wrong and how to do it right.
So there was a person in the room who you could kind of call on in that way?
Yes. You know, I mean, if we're analogizing, it's like sort of degrees of tech help, isn't it? It's like your call has been elevated. And somewhere within all that system, I mastered maths. I sort of did what it said on the tin. And I would sort of ascribe that to the fact that, I don't know, the examples were very carefully graded. So one moved very logically between problems based on their difficulty and the connecting principles, and you were never lost for information. And I think a lot of people in maths and maybe in other subjects missed a bit. They kind of lost a bit of connective tissue. Now they're just sort of holding their head in their hands, and maybe they are sort of ingenious enough to go back and find that or intuit it. But much easier way is to almost to kind of go back to the start and just sort of look for where you forked off.
So why did you need to go to Master Maths? What was not happening at school that in theory should have been able to do this for you? Like what was missing? You know, you kind of put that fault on yourself there, like, oh, you missed a bit or the student missed a bit. But what was happening? I think people would argue that this is like the school's job. You shouldn't have to go to a paid extracurricular activity to save your grades when the teacher could do that. So what had gone wrong? Like what had they screwed up?
Oh, there's lots of things. I mean, it was a brilliant school, and they screwed up so many things. And yet, it was a brilliant school. I think there was no particular oversight. I mean, it was the ad hoc thing I've kind of just described, in that the teacher would tell you why you'd done this thing wrong, but they would never kind of walk you back because they didn't have the time. That particular year, the school had performed a bit of a radical experiment with progressive education, you might say, called big group maths. So you would go to a sort of a seminar all sort of 3 or 6 classes worth of students would be led into a room, and an expert teacher would give an expert lecture for an hour. You'd listen to almost none of it. You'd go back to the classroom, and then you'd be put into small groups. And so you would sort of sit there and you'd kind of go, what the hell's going on? And then you'd sort of gossip a bit with your mates, and then the lesson would end. And we'll scotch that one. I'll get onto it next week. And I think the key thing I've found about maths is that it is a doing subject. And it is just all about kind of powering through a quantity of examples until you can, it's like playing the piano. It's like you just got to get the notes down, man. I found the same thing at university, actually, not to stray too far, but, third year stats, I kind of went to every lecture for the first 3 weeks. And I was like, okay, this is fine, this is easy. I'm going to get back to the student paper, and which was my sort of hobby at the time. And then kind of came back towards the end of the semester to study for the exam. And I was like, oh, I'm in so deep. And I think that's the only exam room I've ever walked out where I was like, I just don't know if I passed that. That'll be interesting. And passed it by 1%, I think, in the end.
And that's because, and you put that down to the fact that you didn't put in the hours, like just put in the work. Not that it was like extremely difficult necessarily, just that you needed to put in the training, like a marathon.
The regularity, the accretion of mathematical training, the sense of systematizing and build day after day. Yeah.
Okay. So then let's talk about, I should sort of put a caveat here, is that you are not in education, right? But you are a journalist, you are a very educated, smart man. What is your sense of where education is now? Take your country of choice. If you want to talk about in the country where you are now or in the UK, just generally, what is your sort of impression of where education has gone, if tech has been involved for better or worse? And then I guess if you think what changes are going to happen in the next, say, 5 years. But what do you think about present day? Like, where are we?
I think the kids are all right in a way. I think it's very easy to be sort of fatalistic and cynical about where the modern world is right now. I think kids will always kind of grow up and they will appreciate what they had. But I just to speak to the English experience, I knew a lot of teachers in that country, and they would tell me things. And so, sometimes just the sort of values paradigm within which they talked just didn't really kind of chime. I was like, why would you do that? Why would you pander to them like that? Why would you? And I think
You mean pander to the students, basically?
Yes, yeah. So in the UK, it's a very hands-off, legalistic culture, and there is a sort of a tranche of schools at the top of that tree who manage to work within that and produce excellent results by hammering down on discipline. And there is another tranche of schools, a bit broader, that just, kind of has this attitude, as Morrissey famously sang, the teachers are afraid of the pupils. And, I think between both of those, interleaving, is just this sense that the pupils should be entertained and that the pupils should be treated with sort of a dense procedural safeguarding. And, I guess in terms of like the flavor of education, there is still a lot of room for chalk and talk. But again, it's like this sort of professionalized world of the teacher has led to an expansion of, aids, props, sort of like interesting lessons. And
tablets.
Sometimes with the tablets, yeah. But I just think overall, I don't think lessons need to be interesting to be interesting. I think they need to be making progress.
Okay. And what about, and in terms of content, I guess to kind of move to like that idea of what will people learn now that will help them get a job, or that kind of connection, which, as you mentioned, was kind of disconnected when we were growing up. What is changing, or is that changing? This idea of what kids are learning, is it the right stuff? Is it the wrong stuff? Does that even matter? I mean, when I think of school, I kind of think like, yes, you do have to go through the process of learning something, right? But actually, you could replace everything with just something completely different, and it wouldn't have actually made much difference. Like, there is a sort of cynical side where it's like, oh, this is babysitting. But I think the process of you can't just babysit and just do nothing, but the process of just learning something is valuable. It was worth my time to do that. But you could have swapped it out for any other subjects, and you don't really have to fret too much about that, is kind of how I think about it. But now it feels like people are fretting about it. It's like, why we should cancel the music department because, none of these kids are going to become musicians and then get a job. That feels crazy. Just feels like, don't do that. Like, just let people learn the piano, and that will be worth their time.
Well, the sort of fork of the British system right now is that it has become intensely focused on maths and English and things that they can metricize. And, in a way you can see the value in that those are the two pillars of becoming a competent citizen in all sorts of other spheres of the wider world. But at the same time, that is often now done to the exclusion of, music and Montessori stuff. And I think much like you, I sort of observe education a lot as being about the political economy of teachers' time and, what teachers want to do with their lives, and the demand for teachers must be stimulated by the supply of education. And that, to me, is like, I kind of would have been happy learning all kinds of things. But saying that, there are also a lot of things to learn when you're a small child. Where would we be without, I don't know, Oxbow Lakes and Boyle's Law? And that does just kind of take up bandwidth. And I think they're not entirely wrong about the fundamentals. I think certain things to take it to what is happening in the university system now. I was talking to a man called Mark Bauerlein the other week, who is an educationalist, a professor emeritus in Washington, D.C., and was instrumental in the refounding of New College, Florida. And he was saying that your paradigm is wrong. Update your software, buddy. About 4% of US college graduates now go into the English faculty. Those sorts of, liberal arts education skills are dying out at a university level, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Because of the expense, right, as well. People, when they are presented with the bill, they're like, okay, we want a return on that investment, essentially, more so than in high school, right?
Yeah, and it is increasingly, becoming the paradigm that, governments are looking into maybe only funding STEM and, sod the rest. If you want to do your Latin masters, fund it yourself.
So then, let's finish off with this idea of that change of paradigm. Like, what, is gonna, let's blue sky it in terms of technology, in terms of AI, if you like. Do you think people need to learn tech skills at any sort of level? Is that just so redundant because it will outdate? And then on the flip side, like, what do you think, without being hysterical about it, like, what do you think, if anything, this tech movement will do to the job market, right?
Okay, without being
Those are big questions. Yeah. Well, you can be hysterical if you want. I mean,
I think in terms of what it will do to education, I think it is going to be a wonderful friend to education. To go back to the sort of master maths idea, to me, that graded sensibility of like, I'm going to do an example, I'm going to check if it was right, I'm going to move forward block by block, feels a little bit more interactive when you have a machine kind of coming back at you and kind of pinpointing things. I don't think it'll ever replace teaching because we need the human connection and we need the values, which, I think basically the more we can just kind of get through pile drive through the hard work with the computers, the more we can use that other time more wisely for all of the sorts of, I don't know, sort of life orientation stuff. Sounds terrible when you say it like that, but
what? We should have a class called life orientation.
Yes,
that'd be wonderful.
By which I mean, adults modeling adulthood in real ways to children and kind of raising them up and raising their game, which a lot of, done quite badly actually to me and near me as a child. And as to the question of whether it's going to kill us all and taking our jobs.
Yeah, you got to ask it. It's sort of like, just like what, I mean, especially this morning, right? The CEO of Amazon said that they are going AI first. They're going to fire like masses of people, and people have stopped pretending that that's not going to happen, Yeah. I mean, he wasn't specific about who those people are. I mean, it's mostly, I guess, people that are, it's definitely not his inner circle that are sitting in the office, but, it is the number one thing that people talk about, like probably second, like the ethical side of using them at all, using this stuff at all. But like people are unsure of what it's going to do to their jobs or the job market. And that kind of has to be thought about when you're thinking about education, right? It has to kind of feed into that somehow.
Yeah. I mean, actually, I remember standing up in guidance class in Standard 7 at Weinberg Boys and giving this little stump.
But what age is that? That's like 13?
So that'd be 15, I think. 14, 15. 14 for you. Just kind of ranting to the class about how like you shouldn't study computers because by the time you study computers will do computers. By the time you get into the job market for computers will do computers. And now my sort of dying wish is that I'd done the very fashionable MCSE course at the time, which was like kind of a ratchet way as a sort of an 18-year-old South African to leverage yourself into £200 a day jobs in the UK job market in the early 2000s. For a brief sort of Indian summer of maybe 3 years.
My dad's friend did the Y2K course of that, the Microsoft Y2K course in 1997, and then moved to the UK to become a Y2K specialist.
Oh, brilliant.
My dad had advised him to do it, mockingly, kind of like, and then he did it and then made a fortune doing it.
Wow, the full man, bear, pig technician. Yeah.
So you predicted this, is what you're saying, at the age of 15?
Yeah, no, I was a terrible futurologist, or at least I was so far ahead of my time. I was Nostradamus. But I think I do worry about this. I really do, because I think this Holocaust is going to sweep in and it's going to take the hindmost. And in the long run, the economy will reset. As Keynes said, though, in the long run, we are all dead. And the types of jobs it's going to come for, and the people who are, in the middle of the swim of life, who are going to be utterly defenestrated by this in a quite randomized way, is going to cause all sorts of social problems and just human misery. I can't see any way around it. I don't see how we kill the machines. Even if we could kill the machines, we couldn't kill the machines. And so it's going to be a social problem that not only politicians are going to have to think about very hard, and they're not really thinking about it very hard, but, philosophers are going to have to think about quite hard, because there is something to the redemption of the soul of man in being a great copywriter or graphic designer or filmographer or, makeup artist on a film even, and suddenly just being booted out into whatever comes next. And, people have to think about what is irreducibly human within us and how we can at least defend that against the rise of the machines, brilliant and exciting though they are.
Right. That's a perfect note to end on. Thank you very much, Gavin. This has been
Well,
great.
thank you, Paul.